Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Corner. It is your boy, your host, the one and only Philip, and today we are going to be discussing probably one of the more controversial movies that have came out in recent times. And you might all know where I'm going with this, obviously, by the thumbnail and then also the title of the video. But we are going to be discussing Disney's live action Snow White, which came out on March 21st, which was just about a week ago. So if you guys are seeing me in the same getup, you're like, wait, Philip, didn't you just record an episode on Novocaine? Why, yes, dear viewer, I did. However, this review is definitely going to come out before Novocaine because I definitely want to talk more about this film first before Novocaine. Now, this film has definitely gotten a lot of controversy behind it. We are not going to be talking about the controversy. Um, Obviously, there have been a lot of news articles, about Rachel Zegler, the actress who portrays Snow White, and there's been a lot of controversy about what she said, her opinion. But we are not going to be discussing any of those political, and we are not going to be discussing any of those news articles in regards to this film. We are going to be looking at this purely from a statistical standpoint. We're going to be looking at the reviews. We're going to be looking at the box office, the budget, and then we're going to be going over the pros and cons, and we're going to be treating this as we are just separating the people involved in this film with the actual film itself. So, will I be one of Snow White's defenders, or will I just jump on the bandwagon and slam this film? Now, again, as you know, I do work at the movies, right? So I have had a chance to sit down and watch most of this film. Now, the parts that I watched, I did not hate, to be honest. Um, there were a couple of different songs and sequences where I did thoroughly enjoy. However, I did not watch the whole film, so I probably missed out on a lot. Um, but overall, I wouldn't slam this film as hard as everybody else. I do think it has some redeeming qualities, and I think a lot of people are focusing more on Rachel Zegler and what she has said versus just what they're trying to do with this version of Snow White. Now, again, if you're able to separate the original Snow White film that was made in 1937 with this Snow White film in 2025 and realize that these are two different iterations of the character and this is not just a copy and paste of the original story, then you will be able to definitely digest this film a little bit more. If you go into this film thinking that you're going to get the exact same thing that you did in 1937, you are highly mistaken. There are a couple of things that I think they do in this film that are pretty positive, and they are trying to do something for this current generation, and they're trying to convey a certain message to young girls. However, with something so classic as a Disney princess, we've seen other live action adaptations like Beauty and the Beast and Maleficent, where, these princesses were adapted into live action and they stayed true to the character while also adding their own twist on it, and they were perfectly fine. I don't know if they just got overly ambitious in this film, or Rachel Zegler just kind of shot herself in the foot. From what I've understood, she had a great performance. Excuse me. She's had a great performance in the Hunger Games. The most recent Hunger Games film that came out, I heard she did, fairly well in that role. Not a lot of people had anything bad to say about her then. So, again, I'm not going to do too much rambling on it, but obviously we are going to be covering Snow White. So, obviously, I'm doing fairly well. This is being filmed on the same day as I filmed Novocaine. So, if you guys obviously, watch that, you'll kind of know how I'm doing. I'm just kind of spending my day off, playing some catch up, recording some episodes for the podcast, and yeah, just trying to get out as much content as I can for you guys. So overall, I'm doing fairly well, and yeah, I'm just excited to kind of talk about Snow White. So I have not seen this film yet. I have not watched the whole entire thing. I do plan on actually going to see it. I might go see it tomorrow, um, because I am very curious about this film, and I want to really see if this is bad or if it's not that bad, as people are saying it is. So, I will maybe let you guys know what I thought about it more personally in the very next podcast episode that I talk about. But for now, we're gonna base our opinion off of what the critics, what the audience thought of it, the box office and budget, and obviously some pros and cons. So we're gonna start real quick by just going over some of the basics. So obviously, this film came out March 21st, 2025. So it came out about a week ago. By the time I'm recording, obviously it has the content rating of PG. It was directed by Mark Webb, and if you're wondering who Mark Webb was, let's see. Okay. So he has actually filmed some films that we might know. He was actually the director of The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Um, and then he was also the filmmaker for the movie Gifted, which did fairly well, as well as 500 Days of Summer, which also did fairly well. So this is really, we see that he does have some blotches on his record. So he's not perfect, but he has directed some films that are fairly good. Um, so I think that is something to definitely keep in mind. So now we are going to be looking at some of the cast and crew that have been involved with the film. So obviously we have Rachel Zegler playing Snow White. It looked like we have a younger version of Snow White that is more white than Rachel Zegler, which is interesting. We have Gal Gadot as the evil queen. We have Andrew Burnap as Jonathan, who plays the prince. And then obviously we have a couple of different voice actors that play, or voice the different dwarfs. So really the main two actors and actresses that really take away from this film are Rachel Zegler, who plays Snow White, Gal Gadot, who plays the evil queen, and then Andrew Burnap, who plays Jonathan. So now that we kind of went over who directed it, and then as well as kind of who starred in it, now we're going to do our favorite segment, and now we are going to be looking at the critic scores. So this movie got slammed. There's really no easy way to put that. Usually, as you know, on this podcast, we look at IMDb, we look at Rotten Tomatoes, and we look at Metacritic. We take a look at Rotten Tomatoes a little bit more specifically, but we also do cover the other two. So we're going to start with IMDb, and IMDb gave this movie a 1.7 out of 10. That is an absolutely abysmal rating. There is really no way to sugarcoat that. That is almost as low as you can get. That is a failing grade according to most statistic people out there and percentage people out there. Metacritic has given this film a 50 out of 100. Keep in mind, Novocaine had a 60 out of 100. So, in terms of looking at it out of 100, it has a pretty average rating according to Metacritic. So Metacritic is a little bit more nicer than IMDb. Rotten Tomatoes is where we're going to get more of the bread and butter. So, and this is fairly interesting. So this is where the movie is going to be kind of cut some slack, in my opinion, right? So with the message that is trying to be portrayed and perceived in this new version of Snow White, you would figure that these scores would be the other way around, right? However, according to critics, the critic consensus of this film, it's not certified rotten, but it has a rotten score of 42%, okay, which is just absolutely terrible, right? However, according to the popcorn meter, the audience has given it a relatively average and good score of about a 74%. So again, comparing that to Novocaine had a 85, I believe, percent with the audience. So looking at a 74, we're looking at about like a C, right? Like a C, C plus, if we're kind of like looking at this at math. So it is a pretty average score. It's not terrible, but it's also not the best, right? So kind of diving a little bit deeper into these scores, we're going to go over a general critic consensus with the film, right? So Snow White is hardly a grumpy time at the movies, thanks to Rachel Zegler's luminous star turn. But its bashful treatment of the source material, along with some dopey stylistic choices, won't make everyone happy either. That is a fairly accurate statement. There are some moments in the film where Rachel Zegler really does portray Snow White. You know, the way that she interacts with the dwarfs, just who she is as a person, you know, the characteristics that she imbues upon Snow White. You know, I don't think she does a terrible job, right? She doesn't do the best job, but she does, you know, a fair enough good job. She knows how to sing, so obviously the songs, you know, they're all not perfect, but, you know, the ones like Whistle While You Work are done really well. However, you know, again, you're going to have people that are going in and they're not going to like the stylistic and the narrative choices they made with this film. Obviously, they do a lot different than the source material. You know, just Snow White, who she is as a person, what they do to the prince, you know, obviously what they do to the dwarves. I mean, you know, probably what they do with the evil queen. I mean, I don't remember the original story of Snow White, so I don't know how the evil queen comes into power, but I'm sure they probably writ that differently too. So overall, it's a fair consensus from the critics, right? So it's not going to be the worst thing that you've seen because there are some redeeming qualities of this movie that do make it enjoyable. It's very colorful. You know, the CGI and the animation for the animals looks really good. Um, you know, say what you want about the dwarves. I've had my own opinions, of course, but looking at their CGI animation and watching them, like, you know, in the songs and just kind of like how they're portrayed, it's not the worst thing, right? It could be so much better, right? They could have hired a bunch of little people, actors and actresses, to play the dwarves. Um, I think one of the funniest things about this film is that there is a character in the film that is a little person that plays one of the rebels. And you had the money in the budget to hire somebody for that role, but you couldn't find other actors to portray the dwarves. Especially when one of the dwarves is voiced by a little person. This is my biggest gripe with the film, is that what stopped you from finding actors to portray the dwarves when you hired some of the same caliber to other roles? So, in a quick summary, the audience says that Disney Snow White may not be the fairest incarnation of them all, but its benign song and spirit make you hum along all the same. It's a very fair statement. Like I said, I mean, it's not exactly what people were expecting, but I mean, you know, after, you know, cleaning the theater a couple of times, I started whistling, you know, Whistle While You Work. So, you know, there are still some catchy songs that you can kind of like, you know, hum a tune to, and it still has some of that magical feel to it, but I think a lot of the stylistic choices, the narrative choices they made are going to turn a lot of people off on this film, and that's just, you know, that's just guaranteed. This is where the biggest blunder comes in, right? So you thought the scores were bad, okay? um, you know, now we're gonna look at the budget and then what is made in the box office, okay? So different sources have different inflated numbers, okay? So um, we don't know exactly how much it made opening weekends, right? But we know that the film had a budget of about 240 to 270 million dollars, okay? Compared to a film like Novocaine, that is literally like almost 18 times the amount that their budget had, right? Like $18 million. Okay. According to Wikipedia, Snow White so far in the box office has made about $94.7 million. Okay. Does it have a chance of surpassing its budget? to be completely honest, I don't think it does. If it came out, maybe earlier in the year where there wasn't really that much competition and there wasn't that much out, so people saw it more, yes, it might barely make its budget back. However, again, this weekend's coming up, not next weekend, you literally have the Minecraft movie coming out, which is going to storm the box office. That film is going to be probably one of the most popular films of the year. Um, you have other films that are coming out in April that are going to take seats against Snow White. This is what Wikipedia says. According to another search from Screen Rant, Snow White was set to earn $48 million over the course of its opening weekend, but that total has ranged anywhere from $48 to $58 million. So another one from the Hollywood Reporter says that Snow White box office limps to an alarming $42.2 million domestic opening, with I think an $86 million internationally. I think, yeah, 87.3 million globally. So yeah, it's not looking very good for Snow White in terms of making their budget back. So we can tell that obviously this has been a colossal disaster for Disney, especially when this is the first movie that they're putting out all year. This is not the way to go. So now that we've kind of covered some of the scores, and the opinions, as well as the box office and the budget, we are going to discuss some of the pros and cons. Okay. Now, we're going to start with the cons, as we always do. So, one of the first cons that we have is the reception. Okay. So, the film opened to a modest box office and received mixed reviews, with a 44% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, I mean, you can't really fight your way out of this con. I mean, they're just spitting facts. to be honest, there's no way to not say that this is a con. It is a con. Again, that is definitely something that is going to bring a film down, where you have a modest box office report. Theaters like AMC and Regal probably have so much merchandise, specialized popcorn tins and cups, as well as, different merchandise for this film. And it does poorly, so, I mean, there's really nothing to say about this con. I mean, it's just basically spitting facts. Another one is some divisive changes, so kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier. So some fans felt that changes, like replacing Prince Charming with the new character Jonathan, and altering the dwarf's role, strayed too far from the classic. Now, this is interesting, because I did not realize that Jonathan was the replacement for Prince Charming. I just assumed that that was the prince, and then they just did a different storyline with Prince Charming. But now what it seems like is that now, I don't think it was like this in the original film, but it seems like in this film, Snow White was always a princess. Her father ruled a kingdom, her father was killed, and the evil queen replaced her father as ruler of the kingdom. So they basically just scrapped the whole idea of a Prince Charming, and instead they just kind of created this bandit / rebel character that fell in love with Snow White. So, that definitely knocks it down a couple of pegs for me, because you're not really you're not really you're not really doing anything related to the original story, except for like just having the seven dwarfs and Snow White and the evil queen as characters. This is basically a whole new film. You're just bringing these characters into a whole new story, basically, which is what I said at the beginning of the episode. I did say that the 2025 version of Snow White is a completely different narrative and a completely different story than the 1937 Snow White. So it shouldn't really come that much of a surprise. However, it is very hard as a casual movie watcher, or even just a casual Disney fan, to sit here and stomach the changes and the direction that they went in this film when everybody knows the classic story of Snow White. This was Disney's first successful animated movie that made billions of dollars. Walt Disney literally mortgaged his house and his whole entire company on this film. It was their first success, and it's what blasted Disney into decades of success. So when you, and she was also the first princess. So you take all that, which any average person would know, and then they see something like this happen to that character, you can understand why people are so upset. You know, um, so again, I really have nothing to say about that too. I do think they're definitely correct. Some people are going to feel a type of way, especially when they are going in to see like, oh, okay, like they're probably thinking, you know what, Beauty and the Beast was really done well. Maleficent was done well. The live action Aladdin was done well. And even with all the controversy and some skepticism behind it, the live action Little Mermaid was done really well. So you look at all these live action princesses that have been done, and you're like, okay, so like this one is probably going to be on par. And then you have that mindset, and then you go in, and then you find out that the whole entire story has been changed or altered. Characters are the same in name and in appearance, but they're acting differently, and they have a whole new origin, or just different. It's going to make people very upset. I'm really not trying to sit here and shit on this movie, basically, in the simplest terms. Because, I just don't want to do a review like that, but it's not giving me a lot to work with, to be honest. So another one of the cons we have are visual effects. So again, some people definitely felt that the CGI for the dwarves and animals were described as distracting and less expensive than the original animation. I think the animals look really well, so I'm going to rebuttal that, and I think the animals did really well. They were really cute. They came on screen and you were like, oh, so they did a really good job CGIing the animals. I think they definitely focused a little bit more on that than the dwarves. The dwarves, again, the CGI does not look terrible. They all have their own different characteristics, and you could tell that, they're different. However, I just think the whole controversy around the dwarves in the first place definitely just dampened people's opinions about them, by the time they decided CGI. So originally, if you can remember way back when this film was still in production and they were talking about this film, they were going to take the 7 dwarves out of the film entirely, right? And they were going to just replace them with 7 people. So this is when it was like a really progressive, like really branched out idea. They were going to just have 7 random people. I think the rebels that we see in this film were probably supposed to be the dwarves, right? And instead of making them the dwarves, they probably like, well, you know what? Why don't we make them the rebels that fight against the evil queen, right? So we can still kind of keep them in the story, but people don't get too upset because they're not replacing the dwarves, right? And then after they kind of scrapped that idea, there was really no call. There was really no, word they were going to like hire actual people to play the dwarves. And then eventually they just kind of settled on CGI, and then people saw the dwarves in like some of the first trailers of Snow White, and they were just like, oh my god. Yes, in the trailers it did look rough. In the movie, however, again, they're not perfect, okay, but I did enjoy the scenes with the dwarves in them. So, again, I don't know how they really... It's been forever since I've seen the original Snow White. It does seem like the dwarves take a little bit more of a back seat. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Dopey ever talked in the original film, but like in this film, like he doesn't really talk until the very end. Because his name is Dopey, but he's actually not dopey. Like he's fairly intelligent. Like I mean, it's hard to like kind of wrap your brain around it and understand it. So yeah, but I mean, in a nutshell, I can definitely see why people are upset about the CGI. Again, but however, some scenes were not shot in the bubble or the dome, which is like Disney's like giant CGI set. Some of the some of the sequences were actually fought. They were actually filmed in a forest. So again, the film is very colorful. So it kind of does have that like magical effect, right? But again, I can see why people are upset about the CGI. Um, Finally, but not least, obviously, we have some mixed performances. So obviously, while Zegler's singing was praised, her acting was considered safe, and Gal Gadot's portrayal of the evil queen received criticism for lacking menace. This is true. I think they could have obviously hired better people to do both roles, to be honest, with Snow White and the evil queen. I don't think Gal Gadot did such a bad job, but you could tell that some of her line delivery and especially some of her songs was just not. It was just not there. You know, I can understand what they mean by menacing. She did not really have that much of a menacing feel about her in the film. It's not like you were like actively scared of her. It was almost like she kind of just like dressed the part and then that was it. Rachel Zegler, on the other hand, her singing definitely was good. I will not fault her for that. Her acting considered safe is an interesting choice of words, because of the spin that she put on the character and what she's had to say about the character. The fact that her acting was safe is a little interesting. She definitely does a good job coming off as compassionate and kind and stuff like that, which Snow White was. Her singing is also fairly good, so you don't fault her for that. But again, I don't know. I feel like there could have been better choices. And Disney kind of dropped the ball on it, to be honest. Uh, yeah. So now that we just spent 15 minutes like butchering this film, now we're gonna go over some of the few things that this film does fairly good, or maybe good's a little bit of a strong word. It does fairly okay. Okay. So one of the first pros we have are an empowering storyline. So the film reimagines Snow White as a strong, independent leader rather than focusing on a love story. So again, we talked about in the beginning about separating the two films in their own directions, right? So if this is the storyline that Disney is trying to go for, where they want to inspire young girls of the 21st century, of 2025, to be strong, to be independent, that is a great message, right? Um, However, I feel like you could do both. I feel like you could stay true to the classic movie, but then you could also convey those messages as well. Because what they're going to start slowly doing is that they're going to start changing every single origin story for the princesses, and then you're going to have a whole generation that thinks the princesses have always been like this, and then you're going to have a whole generation that knows what they were really like. There's nothing wrong about them being strong and independent. You have characters like Moana, characters like Ariel, that are literal embodiments of that, right? You know, However, when you kind of scrap the whole entire original narrative of the film and who she is as a character, and you just try to rewrite her just like that, it's not going to come across as great as you think it's going to come across as. But I do like what they are trying to do. I do think that, especially in this day and age, that I think if you show that, these princesses could be strong, they could be independent, those are definitely good lessons to instill upon young girls. However, is this the right way to do it? And in this case, the message was nice, but the delivery was not the greatest. But they do get a little bit of props for trying to portray a good message. So another pro is definitely the visuals and the music. So obviously vibrant visuals and fresh musical numbers have been appreciated, with Rachel Zegler's singing received particularly praise. She is a great singer, right? So I will never take that away from her. And the musical numbers and the visuals in this film were good. Not all of them were great, but visually it looked really nice, really colorful, and the music was well done. So this is really one of the saving graces of this film, especially when you were a young kid, and this film is meant for kids. You're going to see all the vibrant visuals and colors and music, and you are probably going to enjoy the film. Um, if you're looking at it more of like a more mature adult perspective, yes, the visuals and the music are nice, but you're still going to be focusing on more of the story than like, ooh, the pretty colors and the animals. Finally, because this movie only had like three pros, um, you have some modern themes being implemented into the film, which is kind of what we talked about in the first point. So obviously, the movie emphasizes kindness, empathy, leadership, resonating with the contemporary values. So again, there are some messages, like kindness, empathy, leadership, that are good qualities to have in a person. And Snow White does that well. One of the things that this version of Snow White does, which I'm pretty sure the original one did as well, but she definitely emphasizes, the importance of kindness and empathy, which is definitely something to have in this world, especially in this day and age. Being able to be kind and empathetic and listen to other people and stuff like that is definitely good values to instill upon people. So again, some of the messages that they are trying to portray are very important, and it's good that they target a young audience so they know, how the world works and how it should work, and what they could do to make it a better place. However, some of them, they kind of swing for the fences and they end up striking out. So overall, my review of this film, if I had to score it now, this film is probably getting a solid 4 out of 10, to be honest. Based on the pros, based on the cons, and then just the scores and, all the controversy and everything behind it. This is without seeing it. Obviously, if I choose to go see it still, my score might change. But for now, my score is going to be a 4 out of 10. I can't really say too much on it besides what I've already reiterated. Obviously, again, they tried to do something bold, and they got killed for it. But yeah, I would love to know what you guys think in the comments down below in regards to this film. I would definitely be interested to hear your opinions and what you think about this. But that is going to do it for me today, guys. This definitely is going to be a little bit longer than the Novocaine episode because we had a lot more to talk about. But if you're wondering where you can find this lovely podcast and find my episodes and my reviews, we are on Instagram and TikTok at The Nerd Corner, as well as YouTube at The Nerd Corner as well. So that's where the episodes are posted. And you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok to stay up to date and notified for when those videos drop. So like I said, this episode is definitely going to come out first, and then the following week will be an episode on Novocaine, and then from so on and so on. So definitely keep those notifications on. Check those socials for when the episodes are posted. And thank you guys for coming out to another wonderful episode where we discussed Disney's live-action Snow White, and maybe the not so happy ending that we all thought we were going to get, right? But yeah, I would love to know what you guys think. Please leave a comment and a like, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Follow if you're not already following. Again, thank you guys for coming out, and until I see you again, I hope you have a great day, great evening, great afternoon. Please be safe. Do not do anything stupid, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.